Don't take this as legal advice, but if you are an amateur radio operator, a GMRS licensed user, or a CB enthusiast, and the FCC shows up at your door, you haven't given away your Fourth Amendment rights. You don't have to let them access your property unless they are with a law enforcement agency or some other thing like the FBI and they have a warrant. Will you lose your license? Probably. But let's talk about it. There is a pervasive, outright lie that is all over the internet that when you sign up for an amateur radio license, you lose your Fourth Amendment rights. This is false. If the FCC shows up at your door, they're doing so because they're doing an investigation. They don't just do random knocks to find out if you're breaking the law. They're there because they think there is something causing interference on one or more related or unrelated radio services. Sometimes it's people running a pirate radio. Sometimes it's an individual who has no idea that they're causing interference, potentially in the path of flight lines. And that's the topic of the video that we're going to be talking about today. I have my friend Larzul Corpsalot, Steven. He has an amateur radio license now, but once upon a time he didn't. And the FCC knocked on his door asking if he was running equipment that could interfere with airborne radio traffic. Now, if and at any time you get a knock on the door from the FCC and you are a licensed ham or some other radio licensed operator and you tell them that they can't come in, it's possible and likely that you could lose your license from that. With that said, you don't lose the ability to tell them no. If they show up with a warrant and law enforcement, that's a different story, completely different, and you should talk to a lawyer for those type of situations. And please, always consult with a lawyer. This is not legal advice. But I have talked with lawyers on this topic, among other topics, and covered the FCC when they come to your door. I will link those videos in the video description and the cards, so go check that out. But let's talk to my friend Steven about the time the FCC came to check out his property. So I am here with my friend Steven. New call sign, K3LRZ. We call him Larzul on the Discord.
N3.
N3. I said L3, didn't I? Because that would be you'd be DX at that point. So N3LRZ. Yeah. Lars, Steven, is a longtime friend of mine. But before you were a ham, I remembered a story you told me about the FCC coming and knocking on your door. So you weren't a ham, didn't have a GMRS license, no CB, no radio at all, basically, back then. Regale us with this story, because I think people find it interesting.
Okay, so this goes back many moons ago. But basically what had happened was the street I lived on had a really weak cable signal for cable television coming in off the coax line off the pole. Mm-hmm. So the way our house was laid out is the cable line would come into the house, and we actually ran the coax line all the way down into the basement.
Okay.
And then for some reason, because it was on the outside of the house, it ran down the length of it was a 2-story house.
Oh, great.
So it came to the top of the attic, mm-hmm. down the outside of the house into the basement.
Okay.
And then from there up the center of the house and then branched out to all the rooms.
Okay.
So the cable signal was okay when we only had one TV, but when we decided to start branching out to have multiple TVs on the same coax line, we required an amplifier to get that signal up through the house.
Okay.
So we went back, then it was Radio Shack. Went to Radio Shack. Okay. Seriously. Went to Radio Shack, bought an amplifier.
So this is like a preamp that was outside your home, or where was it?
No. We had an amp inside the house in the basement.
In the basement. Okay.
We hooked up the amplifier.
Yeah.
And for years, we ran televisions in like 4 different rooms, no problem.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind where the house was. This was in Wayne, New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
Right over the top, right overhead was a main throughway, I guess what you would call it, flight path into Newark Airport.
Oh, buddy. Okay.
So every 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, there was a passenger jet flying overhead,
right,
directly over the house.
Uh-huh.
But we lived, like for years, we had this amplifier, no problem. At some point, the cable company put amplifiers on the pole.
Oh, so this,
So
okay, this, I
now,
did not get, okay, okay, so now you're like double amplifying, right? You're
yes,
amplifying the signal, the cable company's amplifying the signal into your amplifier, which is
right.
then going up into the rest of the house to serve your TVs, internet, all that.
Now, as somebody who knew nothing, literally nothing of radio then, I mean, I don't know anything now, but I knew even way less then. And in hindsight, now my house is now a giant antenna.
All that coax,
The coax
multiple,
coming down the side of the house, up through the base, up through the center of the house, and then branching through every room.
right, right.
So again, whatever. Cable was TV looked great. We,
Everything was
whatever. It
fine.
was fine.
Yeah.
One day there's a knock at the door,
Okay.
and these two fine, upstanding gentlemen standing there at the door. They're like, and their first question was, do you have any radio equipment in your home?
Uh-huh.
And we were like, no. And then they were like, you're not running like a pirate radio station or something, are you? Like,
No, wait, hold on. Did they have a badge? What did they look like?
oh no, okay, they were wearing suits,
Mhm.
like very professional looking,
Okay, okay.
they flashed the the movies, they
The
flash a
flip out
badge.
badge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like we're
Okay.
so and so from the FCC, and
Okay. So they did say we're from the FCC.
yeah,
We're
they
here to
identified
help you.
themselves.
Right. Okay.
Right, they identified themselves, and they showed up like, "Hi, I'm Mr. So and so, and this is Mr. I don't remember the name. This is years ago.
Agent Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Agent Tuesday and Agent Wednesday from the FCC, and
Uh-huh.
you know,
We're here
and
to help.
basically, yeah. And so we found out that what happened was somebody had reported a massive amount of RF.
Sure. Yeah.
And we think it was the airlines. We honestly think it was pilots flying overhead.
Sure, because they're not going to tell you it's your neighbor 2 houses down
No, no.
and thinks it's this guy. Okay, yeah, because yeah, of course, right.
We think it was the airlines flying overhead. Like, well, we go over this spot and we're just like losing, comms to everything. But so they're like, "Do you have a pirate radio station or something?" And we're all really confused. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
no.
Right.
So they're like, well, we're getting a massive reading of RF from this home.
The epicenter is coming from inside the
Yeah,
house.
like, and they told us like they were riding around in a van,
Right.
with
Yes,
this directional antenna, trying to find where this source was coming from, and they saw no antennas on our house.
Right.
So they didn't know, like, what is going on in this home.
Right. Okay.
So they didn't come in. They didn't like bust down the door. They were very polite about it. They were like, "What are you running?" And then we found out like it was the coax line coming off the pole, and they're like, "Well, what do you? Is
How?
it just off the pole? Like what's going on here? Yeah, what's
right?"
So we explained to them like, "Oh, we have an amplifier on which is perfectly legal. It's an amplifier
Inside your home. Yeah, you have a
home.
Radio Shack amplifier that was specifically for this purpose. At least I'm assuming it is.
It was meant to boost your cable signal in your home.
Right.
So, and they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, you might want to get rid of that."
Okay.
Because unbeknownst to us, your cable company is already boosting it at the pole now, and you're doubling up on that signal. And we were like, "Oh, okay, we'll take it off."
Did they ask to come in?
That was it.
Did they ask to inspect anything? Did they come in the house?
No.
There's just like,
no.
Oh, okay. Crazy. You got double amplification going on or something. More likely, and not the first amplified. The preamp on the pole was probably doing something wild to the amplifier you had in the basement, causing all this spurious RFI. I'm guessing.
Well, the thing is, what happened was the cable in the area was like, it was a developing neighborhood. Okay, so there was a lot of new houses going up. So as the development continued in the neighborhood, they started adding these amplifiers to boost the signal because the cable signal was more customers on it. They wanted to grow their network.
Right.
So, we never got the memo that they were going to be doing that. And even if we did, we wouldn't have like, whatever, we don't know that you can't boost it again.
Right. How would you know?
So now we have this giant coax antenna on the side of our house, like pushing RF into like, into space.
Into the planes. Yeah, apparently. So, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
over and all, they announced themselves at the door, showed you a badge. They didn't come in with a warrant. They didn't demand to inspect your property. It sounded like they kind of thought that you might have been running a pirate radio station, right? Because that was one of the first things they asked you.
Well, I mean, they might have been serious about it, but I think they were
Oh,
more like when, like, almost like when a cop goes, "Well, you have a bazooka in there,"
oh yeah,
like
okay,
I
yeah,
don't know if
yeah,
they
yeah.
really believe you're running a pirate radio station, but they were really curious,
Sure,
like
I
where
bet.
this noise was coming from, and they were the dumbfounded look on their face. They're like, "What are you people doing in there?"
Right,
Because
exactly.
apparently the amount of RF coming out of the house was so bad.
Yes.
And none of us are radio people, so we don't
Right.
know. It's like our
Right.
noise floor is real high. Like we don't like it's like whatever, our TV's working.
Right.
So
So that's the
so no,
story.
they never asked to come in. That's it.
That's well, no,
They came,
yeah, and they figured it out.
they knocked on the door, they were like, "Hey, what's going on?" We tell them what's going on, and they're like, "All right, fine, thanks, have a nice day." And then they left, and that was it. That we
Did
never heard from them again.
I was gonna? That was my follow up. My last question was, did you ever hear him again? Was there any follow up? So it sounds like they were off to the next pirate radio station to go track that down. It sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, that was it. That was like I was never worried that they were gonna like kick in the door or anything. They didn't come
Okay.
with guns drawn or anything like that.
Good. All
So
right. Well, that's the story. I got way more context actually. I only heard a little bit of that when I heard this years and years ago, but I remembered and I was like, oh, I got to get him on the phone. So, also
it's not a really
congratulations.
interesting
Yeah.
story.
No, well, it is to a ham, particularly when we hear all these rumors of what the FCC is going to do when they come in knocking, and the reality is likely not a lot, and no one can avoid that knock if you're accidentally doing something like this. It was no fault of your own, but you still were creating that interference. They didn't fine you. They just said, "Hey, turn that off. You don't need it." And that was pretty
They
much it.
seem they seemed more interested in like why
How? Right?
and how and then
Yeah.
and the solution to it more than like trying to get anybody in trouble. Like they did not show up to the door like looking to like bust somebody. They were just trying to figure out like what is going on and how do we stop it.
Yeah. Well,
And that was it.
Well, thank you for the story. We appreciate that. And congratulations,
Anytime.
N3LRZ, one of the ham radio fraternity now. So we appreciate you taking the
And
time.
I'm going for my general very soon.
All right. All right. I love to hear that. And I guess we'll talk to you pretty soon on the after chat here for the ham radio crash course. So thanks again, buddy.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope that clears up some confusion. At least you had a good story from my friend Steven on what happens when the FCC comes a callin'. I think this is much to do about nothing, and the people who bring this up are whatever the equivalent of the sad ham is for whatever world they belong to. The tinfoil hat crowd, the sovereign citizen community, the land boat drivers, all that stuff. I think you guys are completely out of your depth, and you are making claims that you have no ability to actually go do any part of research on to figure out what actually happens in these cases, and you're just perpetuating these wives' tales you've heard from I don't know where you're getting them. Soldier of Fortune magazine, I don't know. The most interesting thing I find about this is I got so much flack for having not a Rubicon on my channel for various reasons. The way he, interacts with his community, that's his own thing. But one of the things that he has shined a light on is that the FCC has done very little enforcement in the area of people that are actually bad actors on the air. And they record this information on their website. None of this is private. It's all public. And we have no instances where the FCC has knocked on doors and started doing invasive raids or invasive investigations. They always go directly to the source of where they think the interference is coming from. Often this is after talking to the homeowner about what radios they're running, etc., and then targeting those things and going and looking at those things. Oftentimes, guys, you got to keep in mind the FCC is looking to protect the big money makers for the services that they offer licensing for. FM broadcast, AM broadcast. They have a duty to investigate where the interference exists in those spaces. For almost all the other situations, the most you're seeing is fines for some of these egregious bad actors. Very few, if ever, prove me wrong in the comments, have I heard of the FCC being a part of some triangle of FBI, Homeland Security, or your local law enforcement as a way to get into an individual's property to dig up other crimes. Again, prove me if I'm wrong. However, I know no example of that, so perpetuating that is a myth, a lie, probably, and you really should stop doing it. So hope this answers some questions, and at the very least, I hope you had a little fun hearing Steven talk about his story. I'm Josh, KI6NAZ. Thanks so much for watching 73.